Hello everybody, this is lecturer P.A. Marquez. Let's continue with our final chapter of our introductory course on Roman declamation about Greeks and Romans from forum to boardroom. Welcome, and let's begin as usual with our Roman declamation meditation before opening the content of this chapter, so we can set up our soul, our body, our intellect to really understand and grasp our chapter content, set ourselves up to success as a beautiful artist. The Roman declamation for today is called Via Appia Declamation Meditation. This can be read aloud, or you can practice it right now, silently while walking the first mile of the ancient road. Please try to sit up straight, ground yourself like some kilometer trees emanate from your soles from your feet. Notice how it goes deep into the ground to set yourself as a great pine or oak tree. Take a deep breath, be comfortable behind your eyes, say hello to your fellow declamators, salute them. Now the court is in session and the gavel is in your own heartbeat. Take a deep breath, close your eyes. Let's begin with our exordium. Regina Viarum, Queen of Rhodes. Portrait yourself at Porta San Sebastiano. Breathe the cypress sting there. Feel beneath your souls the basalt blocks first laid in 312 BCE by Appius Claudius Caecus. Then whisper, hear the whisper, O Via Appia, spine of republic, witness to conquest and collapse, please receive my step as a fellow Roman declamator. Let's set up the scene with our narratio. Begin your slow walk. Know how the stones, coat, pentagonal and set without mortar. Still feel like ancient puzzle pieces. Notice the deep wagon ruts, proof that 100 generations have carried grain, generals, and dreams along this same track. Recall that slaves from Spartacus' revolt, who were crucified here for miles, turning the road into a green colonnade of warning to the people. Remember to set up in our Sophistopolis, where crucifixions, parricides, and all sorts of violent happenings used to be normal, in order to open up our aura, our energy to all that scenery, but in a positive, lighting way. Let's start with argumentum 1, the law of straightness. Inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6. Observe that the road points almost stubbornly straight, ignoring hills that will have gentle disgrade. The Roman engineers believed a ruler's justice, like a road, should travel the shortest path. Ask yourself, where have I curved away from duty that required a straight line? What is something that I have been procrastinating that needs to be done right away, like a straight line in a road? Reflect a moment at the center of your head, or go to your higher mind. While we take the oddity pause, invisible river at the first interrupt milestone. One hacked down in late antiquity to raise an emperor's name. Imagine the flowing Aqua Claudia aqueduct, crossing beneath the stones in hidden pipes of lead. Water and road, law and life, one visible, one secret, each sustaining life with secrets and enlightenments. Breathe deep and recognize unseen currents in your own motives, your own ideas that you would like to portray into your declamations. Let's go for Argumentum 2, Voices of the Tombs. Ahead rises the mausoleum of Cecilia Matella, fortress tomb of a woman whose story is lost, yet whose name survives in the marble. Here deliver a silent declamation. Citizens of our Sophistopolis of Rome, if even the forgotten find immortality in stone, what of our deeds engraved only in memory? Let us leave acts, not epitaphs. Let's take into action our motives. Feel your chest expand as if projecting to an invisible jury. Release a breath, as so laying down your case. While we make another oddity pause, catacombs below. As the Basilica of San Sebastiano lies a honeycomb of catacombs, kilometers of faith carved under the pagan way. Pause, place a hand on the paving, and consider how belief tunnels beneath power. Ask yourself, what hidden conviction supports my public stance? Remember that Roman declamation is like the union between the light, the shadow, life, death, love, hate, Adam, Eve, and your declamation is the seed, your emotions, your thoughts, your actions. Peroration, the pine-crowded horizon. The stone rose narrow, flanked by umbrella pines. Each trunk slants slightly, trees grow from burial soil, yet reach for sky. Draw a final breath, raising your gaze to the vanishing point, where road and sky, or maybe rain meet. Speak within your own center of your head, your own heart. No senate, no emperor, no legion will rescue me. My own stride carries me forward. But this same road underfoot carried poets, senators, martyrs. I join them, one more traveler, one more declamator, arguing my case against time. Take a deep breath. Exhale. Let the air live with the certainty that, like the Via Appia, your words and choices and declamations may outlast you. Turn back or walk on, or keep the cadence of these tones in your pulse, in your heartbeat, in your solar plexus, and your heart chakra. The mantra for today: I travel straight. I carry my law within my declamations, my life, my deeds. Reflect for a moment. Okay, now gently return to the center of your head. Take a deep breath. Open your eyes. And welcome to our today's session. Let's start with our Roman declamation happenings. Remember all the concepts, themes, characters that we reviewed from last session on Declamation Law Part 2. And start crafting your own meditation like the one portrayed here. Let's review it. As usual, let's start with our sordium. Try to review it and check for the concepts that we reviewed last session. Senators, father of the jury and you rising generation. Rome today sits on a knife edge between heroism and pity, villainy, between the power of the world and the justice of a single household. Let us decide on which side we stand. Narration: Marcus Fabius returned unannounced to his domus, surprised his wife flagrante delicto with a wealthy young equus, in a search of what he calls justus dolor. The righteous anguish our forefathers deemed unavoidable. He struck down the adulterer. The wife he spared, yet he bound her and would have carried her before her father had the neighbors not intervened. The prosecution roars that the Lex Julian on adultery forbids private bloodshed. Marcus retorts that the same statute affirms a husband's ancient right to punish adultery within his household, which holds sway. That is our status legalis. The charge hangs on status finitibus. Is he a murderer or a lawful avenger? Let's go for our argumentation. Number 1. Responsa of jurists. Papinian himself wrote that when outrage burst in the very moment of discovery, the blade may strike before reason binds the hand. Shall we now condemn what the wisest interpreters allowed? Our city honors the vir fortis, the brave man who defends hearth and lineage. If pirates ride the coast, if bloody tyrants tax us beyond measure, we praise the citizen who answers violence with steel. Shall adultery, which gnaws the city's bones from within, demand less resolve? Number 3. Yet remember, fathers, terra incognita, in which we live, uncharted realm where unchecked wrath eclipses law. The same flexibility that lets statue breath may also suffocate it. Enough indulgent fathers have excused cruel sons. Enough cruel stepmothers have poisoned wards and pled domestic privilege. If Marcus is absolved without limit, every jealous husband becomes a private executioner. Number 4. Power and wealth cannot outrank justice and equality. The slain Equus was rich, Marcus is not. Let neither purse nor poverty strays us, lest we return to Rome into a marketplace where verdicts are bought and sold. Finally, consider good and bad politics. Under tyrants, law bends to will. Under a republic, will obeys law. Our choice echoes beyond this form. Do we keep Rome a city governed by statutes, or invite ghosts and phantasms of personal vengeance to stay every threshold? Peroratio. I ask for a measured verdict. Recognize Marcus Justus Dolor. Yet, yes, affirm that even righteous pain must go to the Lex Julia. Let him be spared the noose but fined and exiled for a term, that he may learn the boundary between courage and cruelty. Thus we reward the Vir Fortis, while warning every citizen that a sword drawn in passion soon thirsts for more. Honor the household, protect the republic, and prove that Rome's strength is not the iron in one man's hand, but iron in her laws, tempered, flexible, and unbroken. Review a bit this declamation and try to craft your own with the concepts reviewed last session that were posted on your notes. Feel the thunder of the declamation of the adulterer crime. Crafted and drew. Notebook. Take on some research. And let's begin with our chapter content. Let's begin our session of Greeks and Romans. Before opening this chapter, we must recall the caveat given in our introduction. A comparative study of Greek and Roman declamation is both desirable and warranted, since declamation involves the western and eastern halves of the empire equally, to the point that any partial analysis of this koine would be ipso facto artificial. However, research of this kind is beyond the scope of this volume, and is still forthcoming. With a succinct introduction to the phenomenon of school rhetoric, can do is to offer some specimena of the problem. with the aim of revealing not only the elements that share between Greek and Roman controversia, but also the divergences, differences, and the similarities between them, to the extent it is possible to trace this to different cultural sensibilities of the rhetoricians, belonging to the two great macro areas into which the Roman world was divided. Initial illuminating proof of the different sensibilities of Greek and Roman declaimers, even though involved in managing a largely shared set of themes, is offered by Seneca the Elder, our beloved Seneca the Elder. Let us consider the theme of Controversia 1.8, which has been translated prior in our first session. A Pierfortis who has distinguished himself in war 3 times wishes to return to a battle a 4th time, notwithstanding his father's provision, and the existence of the law that exempts those who have heroically fought 3 times from militia. This is a figure of the ter fortis, less frequent in the surviving collections, corresponding to the Greek dias asteus. As we can imagine, at the son's refusal to renounce his new battle commission, the father disinherits the young hero. In the section related to division, that lineup of topics to be covered that constitutes, according to the metaphor used by the schools, the bones of the entire controversia. Seneca informs us that all the declaimers propose treating the question whether a son could ever be disinherited if he had availed himself of a power granted to him by law, a quaestio vulgaris. As Seneca says, applicable generically to a wide range of different themes. Above all, paternal abdicatio punish not only illegal behaviors, but also the lack of filia officia. Towards the father, coinciding in this case with the lack of obedience. More interesting is the observation expressed immediately after, in the first person of Seneca himself. Greeks propose initially a question that turns out to be intolerable to Roman sensibilities, whether it is legal to disinherit a vir fortis. I do not see what rationale could be given to justify a negative response, the circumstance of a vir fortis, and in this case, one who, moreover, has fought heroically many times, grants him greater title to merits, but not greater rights. Seneca frequently refers to Greek declaimers en bloc, as if they constitute a compact and homogeneous group in the panorama of teachers heard by him. In this case, Seneca informs us that in the controversia about disinheritance of a vir fortis, in this case, one who moreover has fought heroically many times. Greek declaimers were accustomed to question the legality of the father's action. In this case, this inheritance applied to a son who had done well by the collective and by his family, which was the inevitable beneficiary of his prestige. Among other things, we have here confirmation of his position, through chronologically much later than Seneca's anthology, in the text of a declamation of Libanius, the teacher of Antioch, close to the Emperor Julian, where an Aristeus is inherited by his father, raised as an objection that non-applicability to war heroes of apokerixis. The Greek equivalent of Roman abdicatio. Seneca's refutation of this argumentative strategy is swift. Roman sensibilities. Do not tolerate an imposition of this kind, in the sense that it appeared unacceptable to the particular cultural sensibility of Latin rhetoricians. Warlike virtus, the author argues, confers a plus commendationis, not a plus injuris. It does not influence the legal status of the son, that is, his subordination to the authority of his father, and does not impinge in any way on the father's ability to exercise the prerogative of abdication against him. The position of a son is defined by law and by custom, and has nothing to do with individual merits, however great these may be. One can discuss the greater or lesser reasonableness of the disownment, its timeliness, but the legality of the father availing himself of this tool remains unquestionable. In the same Controversia 1.8 there is another interesting passage. Among the positions of the rhetoricians who defend the father, Seneca cites that of the Greek declaimer Aeschines, in part translating his words into Latin, and in part, and on the crucial point, leaving them in Greek. In the translation we have left it in italics the words that Seneca cites in Greek. I don't care about glory. This is not what makes me more desirous of being with you, nor do I care about the courage of yours that is the envy of all. I want to explain fully my feelings as a father. Each can interpret them as he wishes. I will love him this much even if he behaves as an ape. Seneca comments on these words first in an impersonal form. We had the impression that Aeschines, to express the indulgent attitude of the father, had compromised his dignity. Thus entrust to his spokesman, the rhetorician Porcius Latro, the idea that the father would be preferred, who was guided by rational rather than emotional considerations. Called into question by Aeschines, wars are key values of the Roman military code, such as gloria and virtus. which the father claimed to place below his desire to enjoy his son's company and to keep him safe from the risk of a new war, an egoistic and evidently, in the judgment of Latro, an irrational interest that ended up harming the very dignitas of the father. Obfuscating his role as a mediator of the axiological system in which the entire collective sees itself reflected. The distance between Greek and Latin teachers suggested, as observed by Janet Fairweather, recalls a very similar case in the preceding controversia in Seneca's anthology, whose theme has also been translated in our introducing chapter 1. It features a father who refuses to ransom his son from pirates after his son had killed his two brothers, the first a tyrant, the second an adulterer with the son's wife. The son is then spontaneously released by pirates and in turn refuses to maintain his father after the father, has fallen on hard times. Here Seneca mentions Greek rhetoricians again, still treated as an homogeneous group, and refers to an incorrect question raised by them, whether a father can avail himself against a tyrannical son of a law that punishes by imprisonment those who have not maintained his own parents, here cited in the form, "Children shall maintain their parents or be placed in chains," and present in many declamations with only minor differences. It will be enough to mention one or two occasions in controversia of this kind, when an incorrect question is posed by the Greeks whether it is legal for a father to avail himself of this law against a tyrannicide. Those hands that they say are in certain sense sacred and public, to the point that not even pirates believed they had rights regarding them. Ours do not even consider questions like this. This is essentially a variation of a preceding case, not only because the beer fortis and the tyrannicide are very similar figures, sharing full discretion in the choice of the reward, but also because in both passages the possibility of a father exercising his prerogatives against a son of such exceptional merits as he would against any son in any circumstance is debated, with the further idea that it would be particularly impious to deny liberty to hands that have restored liberty to all citizens, to the point that even pirates, the bearers par excellence of vincula in the universe of Sophistopolis, respect this principle. In this case, the Greeks' thesis consisted of affirming that the hands of the tyrannicide are sacred and public. In some way, they and the person they belong to acquire the status of a collective inheritance, or even a good consecrated to the gods, whose availability is removed from those exercising a purely private and human authority, like the fathers over them. As can be seen, Seneca limits himself to mentioning that Roman declaimers do not consider such questions, without specifying the reasons for this refusal, and this notwithstanding that the expression publicans actually occurs in some texts of Latin rhetoricians, reported by Seneca himself. The reasons can nevertheless be deduced by comparison with the parallel case in 1.8, while Greek rhetoricians considered the merits acquired by children established for their benefit a rule of exception, which exempted them from paternal authority. Their Latin colleagues considered that position unacceptable or simply incomprehensible. In the rejection of the question raised by Greeks, we see again the conditioned reflexes of a culture in which paternal potestas has its own unique profile, lacking parallels in other and different contexts. In this perspective, another interesting aspect emerges, and one relevant to the motive of the conflict between father and sons. This observation that has been made in some recent contributions on the Declamation of Libanius, that in Greek rhetoric disinheritance is invariably represented as a measure that must be authorized by a jury, or even by the bulle. The ancient council of Athenian democracy, and that the father cannot exercise on his own initiative. By contrast, in Latin declamations, father inflict applicatio on their children, without the permission of any public institution, with immediate effect, except in the cases where the abdicatus brings a complaint to the tribunal. To such a difference derived from the characteristics of apokerixis, the punitive measure that in the Greek context corresponds to Latin abdicatio, our information is very fragmentary. According to Alec Harrison, whose manual is still one of the more authoritative reconstructions of Athenian juridical reality, there is no evidence that the father was required to take a case of disinheritance before a judge, nor that the child had the right to appeal. Even the need to consult with the other members of the family is unproven. This is mandatory in Plato's imagined city in the laws, but it is impossible to establish to what degree Plato reworked historical legislation actually in force in Athens. What is certain, because it can be inferred from a Greek term, is that the father decision had to be announced to the city through public bands. This requirement is missing in the Roman world, and this explains why the two verbs used in Greek to indicate disinheritance, apeipon, and its variants, and apokerutum. Only the former has a precise equivalent in Latin, abdico. Declamation is not, for the most part, called into question in examining this issue, and yet the decision of a tribunal as a condition of disinheritance is affirmed in Lucian's Vis Abdicatus. 2 centuries before Libanius, where the decision serves to prevent the father acting on impulses of anger or under the influence of slander. In the Latin controversies, there are occasionally traces of concilium, nece sassorium. Informal meeting of family and friends that a father could convene in preparing to impose punishment against his own child. But normally abdicatio is the outcome of an autonomous paternal decision. It is difficult not to think that this situation is tied up with the value of Roman patria potestas in respect to a Greek father corrective powers, which probably would have made the need to seek a public body's agreement simply incomprehensible to a Latin audience. The different treatment of the relationship between father and sons in Greek and Roman rhetoricians suggests another example. We have already mentioned in the case of Minor 3-6, in which a son kills himself publicly after the oracle fingers him as a sacrificial victim required to stop a plague, and notwithstanding his father attempts to save him. Here we can add that the theme of pseudo-quintilian finds an exact correspondence in the Declamation of Sopatros, active in Athens during the 4th century CE, the author of a collection of school themes, Ta Quaestionum Division, which in certain respects represents the Greek complement of the minores. Even a quick glance indicates that Sopatros attributed great importance to the father's feelings that Pseudo-Quintilian did, imagining among other things that the young man chosen for sacrifice was an only son, a point that is absent in the theme, and portraying the father inconsolable at the prospective loss of his only heir and the support in his old age. In the Greek rhetorician text, the father's major, the expression of a thesis shared by all men, and that for this reason can entreat the indulgence of the court before which the accused is brought. A similar accentuation of defective dimension was instead considered by Controversia 1.8 mentioned earlier, and in the fact that is no trace of it in the parallel development of Pseudo-Quintilian, for the father actually seems pleased by the son's heroism, is not refusing to die for his city, and whose story, for this reason, is destined to be counted as material for exempla. So this, we will finish part 1 of Greeks and Romans because it's a high density on concepts and content. Please try to review all the concepts quoted here on your screen and start developing your own declamations. Thank you for listening, for joining, and I will be glad to hear from you soon with your comments, questions, and ideas on your Roman declamations. So, thank you. This was lecturer B.A. Marquez. See you at part 2 of Greeks and Romans. Thank you and goodbye.